I'm Jayson Jorgensen, and it is once again time for Husker Chat. It's brought to you by Acres Equipment. We are joined by Sean Callahan of HuskerOnline. And Sean, we have a nice Husker victory to talk about. That was a great win for the Huskers on Saturday night. Still some warts out there, but I was impressed with how Micky Joseph had the guys ready to play, and Nebraska certainly made some improvement of that win against Indiana.
Yeah, to be exact, Jayson, 364 days since Nebraska's last Big Ten win, and that was Northwestern, which feels like 20 years ago, that 56-7 win in Memorial Stadium. But, the timing is everything, and I feel like they did get Indiana at a great time. The Hoosiers were missing their top two receivers. They had a very vulnerable offensive line, so it allowed Nebraska's front seven, I think, to get after Bazelak, their quarterback. With a couple of those receivers out, I think Nebraska was much more aggressive with their man-to-man coverage, their press coverage, which we didn't really see a lot of, and they tackled better. All those things added up, but, let's not kid ourselves. That second and third quarter, Nebraska had combined a little over 110 yards of total offense on nearly 30 plays. So there wasn't, there was kind of a pillow fight period of that game that they had to get out of. And they did with a big play to Trey Palmer. And that was even dicey. It was a 3rd and 8 throw that Casey Thompson made there. And as we know, that's the play that really turned that game around.
Also, they played better on special teams, or at least they got the special teams touchdown. And that has been a long time in coming.
Yeah, two things. They got a special teams touchdown, which was the first time since on a block punt for the first time since 2009 Baylor. That was a 20-10 win in Waco. I was out there for that. It was Cody Green's first start. But they had their longest punt return, 22 yards since the 2020 Purdue game. Cam Taylor-Britt had a 27-yard punt return in that game. So two things we just haven't seen a lot of the last couple of years, or several years in the punt block return. And they came up big. I mean, that even just the 22-yard punt return, that matters. It shortens your field considerably. It probably gets you closer to midfield versus the 35-yard line. And that's the difference in points on a lot of drives.
It's funny that the things we used to take for granted are a big thing now with Husker football. And one of them was, you used to always rely on Nebraska. You just figured that Nebraska would win a close game and wear someone down in the fourth quarter. They finally did it. I thought it was interesting what Coach Joseph said this week. It's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to do it. And that win over Indiana has got to be a big shot of confidence.
Yeah, the way they finished out the game, 2-score win, victory formation, doesn't get any better than that. The locker room scene that we saw after the game, there weren't a lot of long runs in that game, but there were a lot of just steady diets of 2 to 7 yard runs by Anthony Grant. And that's really all you need if you can consistently get them. And this offensive line hasn't been great for Nebraska, but they have been serviceable in the run blocking. And I think they came up big. Now, Grant would have liked to probably had maybe that big 40-yard type run to highlight his performance, because that was a very tough 32 carries that he had to really kind of put up the numbers he did. But Nebraska needed every one of those yards.
Today on Husker Chat, we're joined by Sean Callahan with HuskerOnline. It's brought to you by Acres Equipment. Sean, you wrote about it a little bit, so I guess the big key now is, what does Nebraska do with this victory and this newfound momentum, and how do they put that all together and play? They'll probably have to play better than they did Saturday night to win at Rutgers.
Yeah, they're favored on the road by 2.5 points right now, and it is crazy to think that this is the 5th time in 6 games Nebraska has been favored, and they're 2-3 on the year going into this game in New Jersey. So that they've got another great opportunity. I think the timing of the matchup is good because Rutgers is coming off physical games against Iowa 2 weeks ago. They lost, and then they lost handily to Ohio State. So I just think the timing really helps Nebraska playing this game, knowing that the Scarlet Knights have lost 2 pretty tough ones in a row. And, Friday night, I'm not expecting a raucous atmosphere out there. I think in that part of the country, a lot of people have things going on Friday nights. It's probably going to be pretty hard to get a huge crowd there versus, say, a Saturday at 3:30 in the afternoon. So I like the draw of the matchup. Maybe we will get more of a student presence, than normal with a Friday night game. But I think there's some things that you can draw from and say, you know what, this breaks well for Nebraska under these circumstances.
What's the biggest key for them against Rutgers? This is a Rutgers team that continues to struggle a little bit on offense. They have found their identity a little bit on defense, but still they're searching on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, biggest thing for offense or for the Nebraska defense is tackle again. Nebraska only missed 6 tackles against Indiana. They were averaging close to 14 missed tackles per game in their previous 4 contests. So if they can have that kind of fundamental game again with improved tackle play and pass rush, getting their hands on a lot of balls in deflection and coverage, I like this matchup. I think it does really set up for the Huskers. They're going to need to protect Casey Thompson, though. The way that Rutgers is going to get after him, and I think that's the blueprint on Nebraska, bring the heat. Indiana blitz Nebraska over half of their dropbacks. 17 of their 32 dropbacks, Indiana brought more than 4, which is a blitz. And I think for Nebraska, they've got to be ready for that again. The running backs did a really good job last week picking up some of that pressure. They've really tried to overwhelm that right side of the line, particularly with Bryce Benhart there, and bring as much heat there, because that's been the vulnerable side. Turner Corcoran left that game, but they've got to keep Casey Thompson standing, as we know what he means to this offense.
How do you feel Mickey Joseph's handling this interim coach position? I kind of like what I hear from him in the pressers. He's real direct. There's not a lot of fluff there. You guys ask him questions, and I think he gives you pretty direct answers.
Yeah, he's very blunt. He's not going to say a lot that he shouldn't say. And, you never know how a coach is going to be, especially because Mickey, I felt like when he was assistant, he would say quite a bit. I think he's been a lot more calculated with what he says and how he says it. But the players really like him. You can sense that. And I'm not trying to, take a shot at Coach Frost, but you can just sense there's just a different feel with the guys and Mickey Joseph than it was a few weeks back with Coach Frost.
All right. Well, we'll see how it shakes out. Boy, wouldn't it be something if Nebraska could win 2 in a row? That's been a while, too.
2 in a row. They have won 3 in a row since 2016. So, if they can get this one, and by the way, we're on the road at night again. So Nebraska, for their first 7 games this year, will be nighttime kickoffs.
All right. You have a good, safe trip to the East Coast. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Jayson.
That was Sean Callahan joining us once again for Husker Chat. We're here every week. It's brought to you by Acres Equipment. I'm Jayson Jorgensen.